China has positioned over 1,000 ballistic missiles aimed directly at Taiwan. They have 350 warships, the largest navy in the world. They can launch amphibious invasion with hundreds of landing craft, carrying 200,000 troops in the first wave. Taiwan is 100 miles from mainland China, closer than Washington, D.C. is to New York City. Could the U.S. defend Taiwan against China? 2026. War scenario isn't about politics or picking sides. It is about hard military reality based on actual Pentagon wargames that have been run dozens of times with consistent, terrifying results. America can defend Taiwan and prevent Chinese conquest, but the cost is so catastrophic: 2 aircraft carriers sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, 10,000 American dead in 3 weeks, that it might constitute strategic defeat even in tactical victory. And stick with me until the end, because you are going to learn why the first 72 hours determine everything. Why American carriers can't get close enough to help without being sunk, and why the real hero of this war isn't the US Navy, but American submarines operating in silence while surface fleets burn. First, understand what defending Taiwan actually means. Taiwan isn't just some island America has sentimental attachment to. It's the semiconductor capital of the world. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, produces 60% of global semiconductors and 90% of the most advanced chips. Every iPhone, every F-35 fighter jet, every advanced weapon system, every modern car depends on chips from Taiwan. If China takes Taiwan, they control the technology that runs modern civilization. That gives them economic stranglehold over the entire world, including the United States. So when we ask, could the US defend Taiwan, we are really asking, can America prevent China from achieving technological and economic dominance over the 21st century? The stakes couldn't be higher. Now here's the brutal military reality from the Center for Strategic and International Studies comprehensive war game run 24 times, with variations in 2023 and updated for 2026 capabilities. In the base scenario where US defends Taiwan with full commitment, China fails to conquer the island. Taiwanese forces hold with American support. Chinese invasion fleet takes catastrophic losses. But here's the cost. United States loses on average 2 aircraft carriers, either sunk outright or mission killed and forced to withdraw. Between 10 and 20 major surface combatants, destroyers, cruisers, are sunk or heavily damaged. 200 to 400 American aircraft are destroyed, and between 10,000 and 20,000 American military personnel are killed in the first 3 weeks of combat. To put that in perspective, America lost about 4,000 troops in 20 years in Iraq. We're talking about 5 times that many casualties in 3 weeks defending Taiwan. China's losses are even worse. Roughly 50 major warships sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, possibly 100,000 casualties including troops drowned when landing ships are sunk. China fails to take Taiwan, but demonstrates that America cannot defend Asian allies without paying unbearable price in blood and treasure. And that's the strategic dilemma, military victory that costs so much that allies worldwide question whether American security guarantees are credible. If defending Taiwan costs 2 carriers and 15,000 dead, will America defend Japan? South Korea? Philippines? That uncertainty is what China wants to create, even if they lose militarily. Here's why defending Taiwan is so brutally difficult: geography and distance. Taiwan is 100 miles from China. Chinese fighter jets can fly from mainland bases, attack targets in Taiwan, and return in minutes. They can fly dozens of sorties per day. Chinese missiles can hit Taiwan from mainland launchers with flight times measured in minutes. China operates with land-based air cover and missile support. Meanwhile, the nearest major US military base is Okinawa, Japan, roughly 400 miles away. Guam is 1,700 miles away. Pearl Harbor is 5,000 miles. American carriers have to transit days to reach the fight. And they can't get too close because China has specifically built weapons to keep American carriers far away. The DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles, nicknamed carrier killers, can hit moving ships at sea from over 1,000 miles inland in China. They launch vertically, fly into space, come back down at hypersonic speeds, and maneuver in terminal phase to hit moving targets. American Aegis destroyers have interceptors designed to shoot them down, but nobody knows the real success rate against saturation attack. If China launches 50 missiles at a carrier strike group, some will get through. And if even 2 or 3 hit a carrier, that's $90 billion ship carrying 5,000 sailors, potentially sunk or burning. That's why U.S. carriers in a Taiwan fight operate from outside the first island chain, far enough to reduce missile threat, but so far their aircraft can barely reach Taiwan. It's an impossible geometry problem. So how does America actually defend Taiwan given these constraints? First, and most important, American attack submarines. Virginia-class and Los Angeles-class nuclear submarines are the quietest in the world. They can operate close to Chinese coast, hunt Chinese ships, sink invasion transports, and disappear before Chinese anti-submarine forces locate them. In every war game, American submarines inflict devastating losses on Chinese fleet. They sink landing ships carrying troops, destroyers escorting invasion force, supply vessels sustaining Chinese operations. Submarines are America's asymmetric advantage that China cannot effectively counter. Chinese anti-submarine warfare is their weakest capability. American submarine force is their strongest. Second, Air Force bombers operating from beyond Chinese missile range. Number 1 Lancers and B-52s loaded with long-range anti-ship missiles, LRASM, can launch from Guam or even Hawaii, fly close enough to launch range, fire dozens of missiles at Chinese fleet, and return without entering Chinese air defense envelope. Each bomber can carry 24 LRASMs. A dozen bombers means nearly 300 anti-ship missiles saturating Chinese defenses. Combined with submarine attacks, this creates impossible defense problem for Chinese fleet trying to cross Taiwan Strait. Third, Japanese involvement. If Japan commits its forces, that changes everything. Japan's self-defense forces operate modern destroyers, submarines, and F-35 fighters from bases close to Taiwan. Japanese anti-ship missiles can hit Chinese fleet in strait. If Chinese and American forces are fighting from Japanese bases, China faces two-front problem. But this requires Japan making political decision to actively fight, which triggers Chinese retaliation against Japanese homeland. That's why Japanese commitment isn't guaranteed, and Wargames test scenarios with and without Japanese participation. Drop a comment now. Should America defend Taiwan even if it costs 10,000 American lives? Yes or no? And keep watching part 2 because I'm walking through the actual first 72 hours of combat, hour by hour, showing exactly how this war unfolds and why everything is decided before most Americans even know war has started. Now let's walk through the actual timeline of could the US defend Taiwan against China, starting from H-hour when China launches invasion. This timeline is based on CSIS Wargames, RAND Corporation studies, and Pentagon planning documents. Understanding this shows why speed matters more than anything and why the first 3 days determine the outcome. H-hour -72. US intelligence detects massive Chinese military mobilization. Hundreds of ships moving to ports, aircraft repositioning to forward bases, missile brigades deploying. Invasion preparations are impossible to hide. US President convenes National Security Council. Does America publicly commit to defending Taiwan? Move carriers closer as deterrence? Evacuate American citizens? Every decision sends signals and risks escalation. H-hour -24. China begins cyber and space attacks. Attacks on Taiwanese government networks, power grid, financial systems trying to create chaos before physical attack begins. Chinese special forces already in Taiwan sabotage key infrastructure. American satellites detect final invasion preparations. President orders Pacific forces to maximum readiness. USS Ronald Reagan and USS Carl Vinson carrier strike groups already moving toward Taiwan at flank speed but still days away. Air Force begins deploying bombers to Guam. Marine Corps F-35Bs deploy to Japanese bases. Submarines move into attack positions. H-hour, China launches. Hundreds of ballistic and cruise missiles rain down on Taiwan, targeting air bases, radar sites, command centers, ports. Taiwanese air defenses engage intercepting some missiles, but many get through. Casualties mount. Taiwanese Air Force scrambles fighters, but many are destroyed on ground. H+3 hours. Chinese aircraft launch from mainland bases, achieving local air superiority as Taiwanese air defenses are suppressed. But here's where American involvement starts to matter. American submarines operating in Taiwan Strait and approaches fire first torpedoes. Chinese destroyers and frigates escorting invasion force come under attack. First Chinese warships start sinking. This is before amphibious force even enters the water. China now knows American submarines are in the area but can't locate them. H+6 hours. First Chinese amphibious forces begin crossing strait. Hundreds of landing ships, hovercraft, civilian vessels commandeered carrying first wave of invasion troops. This is where Taiwan's anti-ship missile defenses matter. Xiongfeng missiles fired from mobile launchers hidden in mountains hit Chinese landing craft. Dozens of ships sink. Thousands of Chinese troops drown. But China has numbers and keeps sending more waves. H+112 hours. Some Chinese forces reach Taiwanese beaches and establish initial beachheads. Fighting is intense. Taiwanese army engages invasion force. Urban warfare begins in coastal towns, but Taiwan is holding because Chinese can't get enough troops ashore fast enough. Invasion ships keep getting sunk by American submarines, Taiwanese missiles, and now American aircraft are entering the fight. Air Force B-1 bombers launch LRASM attacks from maximum range. Dozens of missiles hit Chinese fleet. More ships sink. H+24 hours, day 1 ends. China has troops ashore in Taiwan, but beachheads are precarious. Chinese fleet has taken heavy losses from submarines, missiles, and air attacks. But Taiwan's air force is heavily degraded. Air superiority over Taiwan remains contested. Day 2, American carrier strike groups still approaching, but not yet in position to launch sustained air operations. They're operating cautiously because Chinese DF-21 and DF-26 missiles are a threat. Destroyers screening carriers, establish defensive perimeter, ready to intercept ballistic missiles if China launches. Meanwhile, B-1 and B-52 bombers from Guam conduct multiple strikes. American submarines continue hunting Chinese ships. The Taiwan Strait is becoming graveyard. Dozens of Chinese ships sunk or burning. But Chinese aircraft operating from mainland still dominate airspace over strait, making it extremely dangerous for any ships, Chinese or American. Here's the critical decision point. Does Japan allow US forces to operate offensively from Japanese bases? If yes, F-35s and F-15s from Okinawa and Misawa can strike Chinese forces. If no, American air power is more limited. Assuming Japan says yes and commits forces, Day 3 becomes decisive. American and Japanese F-35s establish air superiority over Taiwan Strait. Chinese aircraft taking heavy losses. Without air cover, Chinese ships in strait are massacred. Submarines, aircraft, and anti-ship missiles from Taiwan, US, and Japan sink massive numbers of Chinese vessels. Invasion force is being cut off. Troops already ashore in Taiwan cannot be reinforced or resupplied. Taiwanese counterattacks begin pushing Chinese forces back to beachheads. But this is where China faces escalation decision. If invasion is clearly failing, does China escalate? Launch missile strikes against American bases in Japan? Against Guam? Accept defeat or expand the war? Most war games show China launches missiles at US bases in Okinawa. Now US forces on Japanese soil are under attack. Casualties occur. Japan is fully in the war. American destroyers shoot down some missiles but not all. Runways are damaged. Some aircraft destroyed on ground, but this doesn't fundamentally change the battlefield. Chinese invasion of Taiwan is still failing. Week 1 ends. Chinese forces in Taiwan are being destroyed or surrendering. Chinese fleet has lost 50-plus major warships. Invasion has failed. But look at American losses. One carrier hit by missile that penetrated defenses, heavy casualties, ship out of action and possibly sinking. Multiple destroyers hit and sunk. Hundreds of aircraft lost in air combat and ground attacks. 10,000 American military personnel dead or wounded. Japan has also taken casualties from Chinese missile strikes. Week 2. Fighting continues, but outcome is clear. China cannot take Taiwan by force against American and Japanese opposition. But can they accept this defeat? Or do they escalate further? This is where nuclear weapons enter the calculation. China has roughly 500 nuclear warheads. If regime survival is threatened, Would they use tactical nuclear weapon, say low-yield nuke, against American carrier battle group? What would U.S. response be? This is the terrifying escalation ladder that makes Taiwan conflict so dangerous. Nobody wants nuclear war, but once conventional war goes badly, pressures for escalation increase. Most likely outcome based on Wargames. China accepts conventional defeat before going nuclear. Too much at stake. But demands face-saving political settlement. Maybe Taiwan agrees not to declare independence. Maybe US agrees to reduce military presence. Some kind of frozen conflict emerges, where Taiwan isn't conquered, but isn't fully independent either. Both sides claim success. Neither side actually won. Comment. If China fired one nuclear weapon at a US carrier, should America retaliate with nukes? Yes or no? Keep watching Part 3, where I break down what this means for American strategy, and whether US is actually prepared to pay this price. Final answer. Could the US defend Taiwan against China 2026? Yes, America can prevent Chinese conquest of Taiwan, but the cost is so high that it raises fundamental questions about whether it's sustainable strategy. Let's break down exactly what this means. Military answer is clear from Wargames. American submarines, air power, and Japanese support can sink enough Chinese ships and destroy enough aircraft that invasion fails. Chinese forces cannot successfully conduct amphibious assault against Taiwan when facing combined US-Taiwan-Japan opposition. The Taiwan Strait becomes killing zone. Chinese losses exceed what any military could sustain. Invasion fails. Taiwan remains independent. American military objective achieved. But here's the strategic problem. Achieving military objective required losing 2 aircraft carriers, 20 major surface combatants, 300 aircraft, and 15,000 American military personnel in 3 weeks. For context, United States has 11 aircraft carriers. Losing 2 is 18% of carrier force in 3 weeks. That's catastrophic. Those are $90 billion ships, carrying 5,000 sailors each. Building replacement carriers takes years and costs tens of billions. The Navy doesn't have spare carriers sitting around. Losing 2 means American ability to project power globally is significantly reduced. Can't fight in Pacific and maintain presence in Middle East and Atlantic simultaneously. Global American military posture weakens. And the casualties? 15,000 dead in 3 weeks is more than entire Iraq war and Afghanistan war combined. American public hasn't experienced casualties on that scale since Vietnam. Political impact would be enormous. Protests, political crisis, demands to end the war. Question becomes whether American democracy can sustain casualties at that rate. Authoritarian China can control information and suppress dissent. Democratic America faces immediate political consequences. That is asymmetric advantage for China. They can take higher casualties and sustain fight longer because they don't face electoral accountability. America wins militarily, but Chinese achieve strategic goal of demonstrating that American military dominance is over and costs of intervention are unbearable. Now let's talk about what this means for deterrence and prevention. Best outcome isn't winning war, best outcome is preventing war from happening. How? First, make cost clear to China. Maintain strong military presence in Pacific. Deploy submarines forward. Base advanced fighters in Japan and Guam. Conduct regular exercises with Taiwan and allies. Show China that invasion will fail at catastrophic cost. If Beijing believes they cannot succeed, they won't try. Deterrence works when adversary believes cost exceeds any possible benefit. Second, arm Taiwan heavily. Sell them weapons that make invasion impossibly expensive. Anti-ship missiles, sea mines, mobile air defenses, anti-armor weapons. Taiwan doesn't need to defeat China. Taiwan needs to make invasion so costly that China won't try. Every additional Chinese ship Taiwan can sink raises the price. Third, strengthen alliances. If Japan, Australia, South Korea, Philippines all clearly commit to supporting Taiwan defense, Chinese calculus changes. They're not just fighting America, but coalition. That multiplies defensive power and spreads costs. But this requires diplomatic work, maintaining alliance cohesion. Fourth, reduce economic vulnerability. Taiwan's semiconductor monopoly creates mutual vulnerability. US depends on Taiwanese chips. China knows this and could target chip production facilities, making Taiwan economically worthless even without conquest. CHIPS Act investing in American semiconductor manufacturing reduces this vulnerability, won't replace Taiwan's production, but reduces catastrophic dependence. If war comes, America can still get chips from domestic production. Fifth, and this is where it gets politically difficult, maintain strategic ambiguity. United States doesn't have formal treaty obligation to defend Taiwan like we do with Japan or South Korea. Policy is strategic ambiguity. We don't explicitly promise to defend Taiwan, but we don't rule it out either. This ambiguity serves purpose. If US explicitly guarantees Taiwan defense, Taiwan might take provocative actions toward independence, knowing America has to back them. If US explicitly says we won't defend Taiwan, China invades immediately. Ambiguity keeps both sides guessing, and that uncertainty prevents war. Taiwan behaves carefully, not wanting to trigger crisis America might not help with. China hesitates, not knowing if attack triggers American intervention. Frustrating policy, but it's kept peace for 70 years. Here's the hard truth Americans need to understand. Could the US defend Taiwan is wrong question. Better question is, should the US defend Taiwan at the cost Wargames project? That's political decision, not military one. Military says we can defend Taiwan. Politics says at what cost, and is it worth it? 15,000 Americans dead defending island most Americans can't locate on map. 2 aircraft carriers sunk protecting semiconductor supply chain. Is that price American democracy willing to pay? Or should strategy be different? Help Taiwan defend itself while America plays supporting role from distance. Use submarines and bombers and missiles, but don't risk carriers and major casualties. Accept that Taiwan might fall, but make China pay so dearly that victory is Pyrrhic. These are impossible questions with no good answers. That's why Taiwan is most dangerous flashpoint in the world. High stakes, difficult geography, uncertain commitment, catastrophic potential costs. My assessment: America should maintain current strategy of deterrence through strength combined with strategic ambiguity. Keep military powerful enough that China knows invasion will fail. Keep commitment ambiguous enough that neither side takes irresponsible risks. Invest heavily in capabilities that matter. Submarines, long-range missiles, alliances, Taiwan's own defense. Avoid capabilities that do not help or are too vulnerable. Additional carriers in Western Pacific that become targets. And most important, reduce economic interdependence that creates vulnerabilities on both sides. America shouldn't depend on Taiwan or China for critical technology. China shouldn't depend on America for market access that can be cut off. Managed decoupling reduces leverage both sides have and makes crisis less likely. This takes decades but starts now. Final answer to could the US defend Taiwan against China 2026? Yes, militarily, but at catastrophic cost that might equal strategic defeat. Better answer: prevent the war through deterrence, strengthen Taiwan's self-defense, build resilient alliances, and reduce mutual economic vulnerabilities. That's not as dramatic as war planning, but it's smarter strategy that keeps Americans safe and Taiwan free without 15,000 dead and 2 carriers at the bottom of the Pacific. Final comment. After everything you've learned, what should be the priority? Defend Taiwan at all costs, or help Taiwan defend itself while US stays back? And if this analysis showed you the real military costs and strategic trade-offs, subscribe because next video is, what would happen if North Korea invaded South Korea? With 28,500 US troops directly in the line of fire,